Geeks and geekettes, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, senors and senoritas, cats and kittens, comic book fans the world over, from all over creation. Welcome once again to another mind bending, investigatory, soul searching episode of Ask Chuck Dixon, where you get to ask me questions about what I do for a living. And what I do for a living is I write comic books. Let's not waste another second. Greg Augustin, while I have you, I recently came across a digital comic from Dark Circle Comics, formerly Red Circle Comics of Archie Comics, titled Mighty Crusaders, The Lost Crusade. It was an anthology book from 10 years ago that had a tale about the comet written by you and drawn by Ken Hooper. How did you get that gig? How familiar were you with the MLJ Archie stable of superhero characters that include the Shield, the Hangman, the Web, contemporaries of the Golden Age, Superman, Batman, Captain America? Yeah, I did a comic backup story. Maybe it was 8 or 10 pages long in the back of this very comic book. And yeah, the Archie people knew me because I'd worked on a failed project called The Governator with Stan Lee, the one that Arnold Schwarzenegger becomes a superhero, and then but in real life Arnold turned out not to be so much of a superhero, so they canceled the project while we were still working on issue 3, and they asked me to do some work with their Mighty Crusaders characters, and I was familiar with them. I bought some of them when I was a kid in the 60s and thought they were pretty lame. But then I bought they had a new iteration in the 80s, and I bought them. And hey, they were some good comics. Um, and my favorite of all of them was The Comet. I forget who wrote it, but Carmen Infantino and Alex Nino did the artwork on a couple of issues, and it was really good. It was really sort of, more down to earth kind of cosmic hero. I don't know how to phrase, but I really enjoyed that issue, and I learned more about the comet's past, and the comet was brother to the Hangman, who was kind of a Punisher type character back in the day, and the Hangman died. A few weeks ago, I talked about the death of Mentor in the Thunder Agents and how that shocked me. But Mentor wasn't the first superhero death in comics. So the Hangman died back in the Golden Age. And what I liked about the comedy, he's kind of a mean character. He's a real cosmic Avenger type, like Nexus, like Zaylan. So when they said, you want to work on some superhero comics for us, I said, hey, this Comet guy, I like the Comet. So they just let me write a Comet story with the eye to doing a Comet miniseries. And so I lined up me and Scott McDaniel, and we were going to do a Comet miniseries. And I kept submitting storylines, but they kept saying, oh, we love this. And then they would have notes, and the notes entirely would change it. Then they would change their mind and go, well, maybe we don't like this anymore. How about pitching again? And so I would pitch again a different storyline. And they would do the same thing, notes, lots of talking on the phone, and then ultimately say, no, how about something else? And at that point, I gave up. The other reason I gave up was because they said they wanted to go dark. And as you said, the line is called Dark Circle Comics now instead of Red Circle. And it's like, yeah, don't we have enough of that dark crap in comics? I mean, why would you want to go there? Plus, the Comet, kind of dark on its own without getting any darker about it. Now, I don't remember what my approach was or anything else, but I know that I liked what I wrote, and I liked my approach to the character, and I'm really looking forward to working with Scott McDaniel again. But the people at Archie thought better of it, and I'll leave you there with that. You can formulate your own opinion on the folks at Archie. Okay, Gentle Savage. He wants to know, Mr. Dixon, do you have any advice on how to do a good plot twist? Yeah, plot twists are you need them in a story. I mean, I'm a big fan of the deconstructed plot line. I think most good stories have a deconstructed plot line. Things just generally never go well for the hero of the story or the cast of characters you presented. And that's the basis of a good story. I mean, nobody wants to write about a day where everything went right. It's not interesting. Um, complications arise, obstacles, enemies emerge, difficulties ensue. And the best way to introduce them is unexpectedly. So there's your plot twist. That's the definition of a plot twist, something that happens that you did not see coming. Um, but the thing to remember with plot twists is they require setup. When things just happen out of nowhere, I mean, and that can happen in a story. Um, you you want to have a bit of setup so that your plot twist has some resonance, and it can't just I'm showing here for those who are watching or those who are watching can see what I'm showing you. I'm showing here for you who are only listening. It's a still from Psycho, from the conclusions, not the spoiler conclusion of Psycho, but the last scene in Psycho. And you know, this plot twist, surprise ending, big whatever, it required setup. And if you and not only that, not only did it require setup, but it required the writers to write the setup in such a way it didn't appear to be a setup for anything. It just appeared to be part of the story. And the best part of these kind of plot twists are they make you go back. They pitch your mind back to all of the clues that were laid beforehand. Like, oh wow, I didn't see that. Yeah, I remember this. I remember that. I remember that. And that's where this twist came from. Um, so it's got to be set up, set up, set up. I'm showing a picture now. Once Upon a Time in the West. If you've seen this movie and you remember it, you remember these blurry flashback sequences, and it's like that's all set up, and it comes to like this crashing crescendo of a plot twist or a surprise ending at the end of the film that once again casts your mind back across the rest of the film so that everything that Charles Bronson said, the very few lines he has in this movie, all of them have a new resonance because now you understand the context. And, that's the way you go with that stuff. The Conversation movie with Gene Hackman, another great example where you were not aware of the setup. The setup is hidden from you. Now, Once Upon a Time in the West, you're obviously watching a setup, but you have no idea what you're seeing or what relation it has to the story. In The Conversation, all you're exposed to is what the Gene Hackman character can see and hear. And he misinterprets what he's seeing, but Francis Ford Coppola makes sure that you misinterpret it too. And that's the twist. That's the plot twist. And it required all of that setup, all that seemingly repetitive, um, uh, what just seemed like, inconsequential background noise literally turns into the setup for the big plot twist. Other things more subtle. Blade Runner, the James Edward Olmos and his little origamis. You realize they have something to do with the plot, but what you don't realize, you realize it's like his sarcastic little asides to the Harrison Ford character. But what you don't realize is the origami itself is a setup to the plot twist that's introduced toward the end of the film. And I'm talking the director's cut, not the theatrical cut. And this little device, this little origami device takes on all of this significance, but it was set up. If this just came out of nowhere, it wouldn't have any kind of impact on the viewer at all. It needs to be foreshadowed, but not telegraphed. So it's important that you not know that you're being set up. Now, some endings come out of frickin' nowhere. Some plot twists come out of absolutely thin air. And I'm looking at you, Empire Strikes Back, a movie I love, with the Luke, I am your father scene. That comes out of nowhere. There is no setup for that. In fact, the setup, there's an anti-setup for this. It, and nothing will ever convince me Lucas just didn't pull this out of his hat, to clean up a common phrase. Um, because this would mean that Obi-Wan Kenobi lied to Luke Skywalker in the first film, something that Lucas wouldn't have had him do if he knew that he was going to have Darth Vader turn out to be Luke's father. It just makes no sense whatsoever. Also, the Luke and Leia possible romantic entanglement. I mean, he would never would have gone there if this was the ending he was looking for Empire Strikes Back and this setup for the rest of the series. So you'll never convince me that this wasn't just tacked on as a last minute inspiration. When I saw this at theaters, a lot of people were like, oh, it's his father. And I thought, no, he's lying. He has to be lying. Look at the evidence presented in this movie and the previous movie. Of course he's lying. He's an evil son of a bitch. He's just trying to manipulate Luke, and he's lying and saying, I'm your father. And then we find out, no, he really is supposedly his father. But it raises all these questions. You know, if Luke and Leia are so infused with the Force, how did they not already know this? How did in the very first time Leia meets her father, she doesn't realize this is my father? She's got the Force. Whether she realized she had the Force at the point or not. Also, he's willing to torture her in the first film. This doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. If he was going to reveal himself to anybody as the father figure, he would have revealed it to Leia in the first film. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. So some twists are just totally contrived. And then some twists are weird. I don't want to spoil the movie, but Unusual Suspects. We find out that everything we've seen is not true. You know, the setup is a lie. It kind of breaks the rules of cinema, and you wouldn't want to see a movie like this all the time, but it's certainly made for an interesting ending. And it made for, and it's a good film as well. But to find out that everything you've just watched is fiction within a fiction, it's kind of weird. Now, 101 for me, if you want to learn about setup, twists, and turns, it's a movie called A Perfect Getaway. And it stars Steve Zahn, Timothy Oliphant, Mila Jovovich, and I forget the other woman who's in the center of the screen here. But A Perfect Getaway is it's sort of a mystery thriller. It's by the guy who wrote and directed the Riddick movies. And then this is as far afield from them as you could possibly get. And it's about, basically two vacationing couples who meet on vacation in Hawaii. And that's just the beginning of the story. This movie so perfectly, and I rewatched it recently, and I've seen this movie multiple times. It so perfectly, seamlessly sets everything up so that you know you're being set up. I mean, you can see the setups, but you don't understand what they mean until later in the film. It's a version of everything you know is a lie, but what you're being presented with is the truth, but the truth out of context. And all of these, twists and turns in the story, they're not contrived. As they come along, you're like, oh yeah, okay, that's what they meant by that. I thought they meant this, but they meant that. And it really is it's a terrific fun film to watch in any case. But it's also a masterclass in how to set up and defy and exceed audience expectations with the twists and turns. Twin spin. Didn't see that coming. Gentle Savage. He's back with, have you ever painted yourself into a corner when writing a story? If so, how did you get out of it? Well, good writers always painting themselves in the corner. You're always coming up with stuff. You're always writing checks you're not sure your ass can cash. It's called challenging yourself. And you can sit and outline. Well, I guess some writers do it. They sit and they outline until the cows come home. I can't do that. I can't do the outlining. I want to just get into it and just start writing. And, and then figure it out. And if it doesn't work, go back and rewrite. So, I've painted myself in the corner quite a few times. But the worst time I can imagine, it wasn't me painting myself in the corner. I've told the story before. it was my editors, the publisher or the editor in chief. Um, Paul Paul Levitz wanted Oliver Queen out of the picture, and he wanted Connor Hawke to take over as Green Arrow. This was this second generation kind of thing going on at DC, where they replaced the original Flash, the original Green Lantern, and they were replacing Green Arrow with Connor Hawke, and they wanted Ollie out of the way. I don't know why, because I kind of like the fact that Ollie was still around in the book, father and son, world adventure kind of thing, and I like the conflicts between the two of them and the rest of it. But they wanted him gone, and initially he was supposed to. They told me that he's in a trap. You have to put him in a trap that Superman can't get him out of. And I'm like, I don't know where this came from. Apparently, Paul Levitz loved this idea, and I don't know why Superman had to be involved at all, but he did. So I had to come up with a trap that would disable Oliver Queen. It basically would remove one of his arms, but and it was a trap that Superman could not get him out of. And so it took me a long time to come up with this one because of the Superman element. Traps are hard enough, but then you would think, oh, okay, yeah, you came up with this awesome trap, but Superman could get him out of that. You got to come up with one Superman couldn't get him out of. And so my solution was, Ollie's basically got his hand caught in this dead man's switch kind of bomb device. It's going to go off over Metropolis. And if he removes his hand from the device, it will go off and it will kill him. And the Superman shows up and doesn't know what else to do, so he uses his heat vision to amputate Ollie's arm and flies him away, and the plane explodes. And so we were going to have a one-armed Oliver Queen, and he couldn't be Green Arrow anymore, obviously, because you need two arms to fire a bow. So I figured all of this out, and then Paul just said, I changed my mind. I just want him to die. And so, okay, so I used the same situation, except Oliver, rather than get his arm cut off, he simply releases the dead man switch voluntarily and blows himself up. But that was probably the nastiest corner I've ever been painted in. And I'm not saying this in a resentful way. I appreciated the challenge. But boy, I wasn't easy to live with while I was trying to figure this one out. Triple spin! Another twist and turn for Mr. Savage. Gentle Savage is back with Mr. Dixon when it comes to all the new villains you created for Nightwing during your Nightwing in the 1990s. Which writers do you think have handled those villains you created the best in other Nightwing runs? Also, did other Nightwing writers ever ask you for advice on how to write those Nightwing villains you created during their Nightwing runs? No one ever contacted me to ask me, except I think I had a few conversations with Devin Grayson when she took over, because she was the writer who took over immediately after me, and she just had some questions about, where I saw a couple of storylines going, because I kind of wrapped everything up, but I left her a couple of cliffhangers as well, and mostly I just said, look, however you want to resolve them is up to you. I just wanted to have a kind of a continuity. I didn't want to wrap it up to like, this is Chuck Dixon's last issue and everything gets sewn up in a bag, because where does that leave the next writer to go? So I said, I left you a couple of like dangling plot lines that are easily resolved. They were like either or, yes or no kind of plot lines. And but as far as who handled my villains best, I really can't remember. They didn't really consult with me, and I didn't really read the run after I left. But I gotta say, largely I don't like how they handled any of them, because they killed all of them. Lady Vic is the only villain I created for the series. I created a lot of villains. Nightwing had his own rogues gallery, but it seemed like they made a concerted effort to kill every villain I created, but somehow forgot Lady Vic. And so Lady Vic survived the Nightwing apocalypse, the Nightwing Holocaust, she walked away from the carnage in One Piece to be in other comics. So I'm pleased about that. But all these characters I created, they purposely killed, and just in case they were to miss one, they nuked Bloodhaven and killed everybody else. Thankfully, Lady Vic was not an American citizen. She's probably somewhere else in the world. So she missed getting blown up real good by Dan DiDio. So yeah, it's kind of scorched earth. It's like, don't let the door hit you in the ass on the way out, Dixon. We're gonna take over your series and just flatten it. This is all post Devin Grayson. This is all the writers who took over after her short run. So here we go. Another question from GH392. Are you a fan of Master of Kung Fu? Do you think there could be a market exclusive to martial arts comics? Yeah, I think there could be a market for almost any kind of comic. I mean, look at manga. I mean, I think a line of golf comics would sell somewhere. Yeah, I mean, martial arts is, basically it's superhero stuff. It's lots of fighting and rough and tumble, and it lends itself well to the visual medium. And you got all kinds of stuff. You got Chinese kung fu, you got samurais, you got period martial arts things, you got martial arts fantasy stuff, you got modern day, chopsaki stuff. Absolutely, absolutely. As popular as this stuff is and continues to be in movies, certainly be popular in comics. And was I a fan of Shang-Chi? Yeah, I read it avidly, both in his own comic and in Deadly Hands of Kung Fu. Never missed an issue of either. And I really liked Shang-Chi because the Galassi artwork was terrific. It was really fun at the time. And Doug Mensch's writing on the title. He and Paul were a match made in heaven, because he took the series into like the James Bond territory. So, you had this wild globe spanning adventures with lots of fights and chases and all the rest of it. And then you had Paul's terrific artwork along, to really, really bring it home. And yeah, I was, like I say, never missed an issue, avid follower of it. And I was a big enough fan of Shang-Chi that I included him in my Marvel Knights run. I was basically told I could have Daredevil, I could have Punisher for Marvel Knights, and whoever else I wanted was up to me. And so I included Shang-Chi in the mix because like I said, I really liked the character and look forward to a chance to write him, because I like the martial arts genre. I mean, I generally like to see any genre explored other than just superheroes in American comics. I think it's, I think actually martial arts these days would be an easier sell to a casual reading audience than superheroes would be. Because quite frankly, despite the success of all superhero movies, I think that the martial arts stuff appeals to an even broader audience. So there you go. Now we got Jamal Sandler. He wants to know, do you ever deal with self-doubt in writing? In my beginning stage of my comic book writing career, and I definitely feel it sometimes after finishing looking over a script I've finished and constantly want to change things. How do you overcome the sense of self-doubt and fear of sharing to others? Well, you just have to. Don't think about when you're finished with a job, don't think about the job you just finished. Think about the next job. If you're going to be a professional comic book writer, you're going to be piling up stuff behind you, and you're going to get better at it. Everything can't be perfect. Plus, you're in a collaborative medium. You're working with an artist. If there's some deficit or problem in your story, either your editor or your artist is going to bring it up to you. And it's just like, if you've ever been to art school or met someone who's been in art school, and they tell you never throw away your drawings. Even if you do the crappiest drawing in the world, keep it. Because how are you going to know that you're progressing? The point is, if you're in art school, you draw. And over time, if you have talent, you're going to get better. And you have those, really lousy early drawings of yours to look back on and go, wow, I really have improved. I really learned something. I'm better at this than I was 6 months ago, a year ago. And the same thing for writing. You're going to learn as you go along. You can't just get a degree in English literature and instantly you know everything about writing. It's not possible. It really is a hands-on, more of a mind-on, but a hands-on kind of thing. You have to just go for it. And as far as confidence, I mean, these are your ideas, and you're presenting them. Your only concern is, was my idea any good? Don't worry about that. Did I present my idea well? That's your biggest thing. And I've said before, I'll say it a million times. You need an even mix of ignorance and confidence. You need the confidence in your work. This is my idea. I'm going for it. And you need the ignorance. It's granted to you that you don't know what you're up against in a competitive field, incredibly competitive field. You have to ignore the fact that it's incredibly competitive, and that there are hundreds and hundreds of writers who are already 2 laps ahead of you. You have to forget all that. Like Han Solo said, never tell me the odds. And the thing about writing, confidence in your writing, is you came up with this initial idea. You thought it was good enough to explore. You thought it was good enough to spend the hours and days and weeks and months, or however long it took you, to reach a finished script, to have something ready to go, a plot line or a full script story to hand to an artist, and you thought it was good enough. Every artist, or every writer, I should say, as you're working, particularly, I mean, I've learned this in novels. It happens all the time, but it can happen in comics as well. If you're writing in any kind of long form, after a while, you get a little tired of your own story, and you start to think, wow, this is, I'm getting into a bit of a slog here in the long middle passage. Maybe this idea wasn't that good to begin with. That's only because you're spending all the time with it. By the time you get to the middle of a long form work, you're standing too close to it, and you can't see it. And what you have to remind yourself is that I'm the only one that knows this story. It's up to my readers or whoever to decide whether it's good or not. And it's all going to be a surprise to them. I mean, I've written stories that I thought were okay, and people have gone crazy about them. They love them. I'm like, wow, I mean, I thought that was a workable story, but boy, these, some people really thought this was great. I mean, they really, really enjoyed it. And you don't know that sitting there writing it, because you're just putting your ideas out there, and hopefully they're fresh ideas and new ideas, and they're heartfelt. There's lots of edge and heart in your work. And, you just got to put it out there. You can't be afraid to put it out there. You have to, be anxious to put it out there. You've got to be eager to get an audience to take a look at this stuff. And if there are things they don't like, and there's always going to be things somebody doesn't like, like they say, never read the comments. In every bad review, you remember the rest of your life. Every good review, you dismiss. But you just gotta get out there and do it. If you've got a burning in your gut to tell stories, you've got to satisfy that urge. You've just got to do it. And some things are going to hit, and some things aren't, and that's just the way it goes. And it's like, better luck next time. We'll get them next time. I've heard that a few times recently. We'll get them next time. Yeah, just don't worry about what anybody says or what anybody might say or anything else. There's always going to be haters who don't like what you're doing, because they wish they were doing it, quite frankly. But yeah, it's just something to deal with. It's like writer's block. You only get writer's block if you acknowledge writer's block. Just don't acknowledge the incompetence. Don't acknowledge that there might be something wrong with your work. I mean, I don't know where. I mean, I was the most ignorant guy you've ever want to meet getting into writing. I didn't know anything. I didn't know. I had no idea what I was up against. And I would talk to other people, artists and writers. I knew a lot of creative people back in the day, and they would have a bad interview or a bad review of their work, and they would just be down, just down, like, oh, well, I'm wasting my life. I'm never going to make it. I had the exact opposite reaction. I would leave like a bad interview or a bad pitch in children's books or comics and go, I don't know what they're talking about. They're idiots. I'll show them someday. This is a great idea, and I know it's a great idea, and I'm going to stick with it to the end. And, I don't know where that came from. I mean, I had no real source for that kind of arrogance, but I had it. And thankfully, it's carried me to right now, talking to you after a what will soon be a 40-year career of writing comics professionally and never having a real job. Not in the last 40 years, anyway. Kane Dorr. What is the Robin problem that I keep hearing posted and chatted about all over the internet recently? Clearly, there are a lot of Robins and there are many Green Lanterns and Flashes, but there are many Green Lanterns and Flashes as well. Yeah, I mean, I don't, like I said, I don't read the comments, so I don't get into a lot of this stuff, whatever the latest controversy is. I mean, I got to write the third Robin, and at the time, he was the only Robin. In that time, Batman would, one Robin would retire or die, as 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 happened, and Batman would, find himself a new Robin, or in case of Tim Drake would apply for the job, basically. So, but I understand there's a bunch of Robins, that came along later. There's Red Robin and this Robin and that Robin, and yeah, I think there are too many Robins. It's a gimmick. They turned it into a gimmick now. It used to be a generational thing. That a new Robin arrives, but now it seems to be, every couple of years they throw a new Robin into the mix, and the old Robins aren't dying off, so they're kind of piling up. Pretty soon they're going to have to put bunk beds in the Batcave because there's going to be so many of them. So yeah, I guess there is a Robin problem. I don't, like I said earlier, I don't really follow the stuff once I'm not working on it anymore. I'm not paid to think about it anymore, so I'm not following the comics the way I would have followed them when I was a kid. So I don't know, but I do know there's a whole bunch of Robins, and that's probably not a good idea. Whole bunch of Green Lanterns, whole bunch of Flashes, probably not a good idea either. But again, it's a gimmick. We're going to get you in. We're going to show you this new one, and maybe you'll love him more than the original. It's like they're giving us too many options, largely because they don't have any new ideas of their own. So they're just basically retreading over and over again. Hey, Twin Spin, you earned it. Kane Dorr is back with something I think is missing from the Batverse are almost Robins. When you think of all the people who didn't get the job, get cut from the tryouts, didn't make the team in every industry and every sport, to me, it seems like there should be a handful of almost Robins who got pretty far into the process, but ultimately didn't work out. Hell, Alfred could use them like a Baker Street Boys. Why do you think they don't exist? Have you ever tried to pitch a character like that? That's a pretty good idea. The wannabe Robins, the ones who try out and don't make it. I mean, that would be good for at least one story. I kind of explored this when I created Tad Ryerstad, the ersatz Nightwing in the Nightwing run, where he wants to be Nightwing. So he just makes his own costume out of a hockey jersey and a mask and goes out as Nightwing without understanding what the hell he was doing. But yeah, there's potential there for a lot of good stories about a guy. I could see introducing a guy or a gal who wanted to be Robin, couldn't make it, and continues on as a character, continues on as a useful ancillary character for the Bat characters. It'd be kind of interesting. As far as Alfred having a sort of Baker Street Irregulars, I don't know if I'm that big a fan of that idea. But regardless, if anybody from DC is listening in 6 months to a year, you'll see all of this happen because they don't have their own ideas anymore. Okay, Hippopotamus 1. Is there a Hippopotamus 2? I thought I'd mention how much I enjoyed reading the Secret 6 issue from the Tangent line of comics that DC did back in '97. I discovered these comics later on, of course, in back issue form, and the Secret Six issue, along with the first Atom comic by Dan Jurgens, were probably my favorite. Now to the question, though, sorry, what was it like working in the Tangent stories where the names were the same but the characters weren't? Quite frankly, I'm surprised this was 97. For some reason, I thought it was later. Um, but yeah, I mean, it was fun. I think Dan Jurgens ran this whole thing. I think he was like the guy behind this, or was tasked to be behind it. I don't quite know the reasoning for it, but much like the amalgam line, um, the idea is you were to present this alternate DC universe uh, where the trademarks were there, but you were free from any kind of real continuity, and you were free from you were free basically to create an issue that was in the middle of a run or the middle of an arc. It didn't have to lead anywhere, but it had to be engaging throughout. And I mean, that was the fun of it. I want to say that this might have been a way, maybe DC was thinking of creating a tangent universe where they could throw out names of characters in order to keep trademark. I don't know the whole trademark rules thing, but I do know it's a concern that every once in a while you got to throw a character a bone out there. I mean, recently Marvel has begun reprinting the cross-gen line in omnibuses. And the main reason that was explained to me, the main reason for that is to maintain the copyright and trademark on those characters. I don't know why they have to do that, but apparently they do. And maybe this was a way, maybe this was going to be an annual thing where they were going to have tangent issues, and whatever characters' trademarks were coming up for renewal or near expiring, they would say, well, use these characters. Because I was definitely given a list of characters to use. Here's the names you have to use. What you do with them is up to you. So it was kind of a fun experiment, a fun challenge. But I think the reasons I just gave for even doing it in the first place, I think they might be the reasons. If anybody who was in the higher ups at DC at the time know whether or not what I'm saying is true or complete nonsense, let me know. Let me know if anybody happens to be listening. But that's the only reason I can think of for doing this and doing it once, because even though we did it one time, think about it, dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of characters were used in the various issues done by the various people. And for me, the biggest thing is I got to work with Tom Grummett again. Always a treat. Bat Neil, Mr. John Morgan Neal. Many a TV show is based from movies, some more obvious than others, some more successful than others. I like to hear some chin wagging about this subject in general, and perhaps some specifics of the following examples. The Odd Couple from The Odd Couple, MASH from MASH, McCloud from Coogan's Bluff, Doctari from Clarence the Cross-Eyed Lion, Dukes of Hazzard from The Moonrunners, Sugarfoot from The Boy from Oklahoma. Yeah, I mean, a lot of TV series are based on movies, especially back in the day. And I remember The Odd Couple. I love the movie. I was never a big fan of the TV series. I knew people that were. I knew people that never missed it. But for me, Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau were the alpha and omega. There was no reason to ever recreate this. And I was perfectly happy with the Odd Couple movie being the only story of Felix and Oscar. Certainly audiences were happy with that, as was revealed when they tried to do a sequel. Nobody went to see it. But yeah, I mean, certainly Tony Randall and Jack Klugman were terrific in their roles. I've seen a few episodes. I was over at other people's houses at the time, and they had it on, and it was it was funny enough, but not funny enough for me to watch it every week. MASH, another one. MASH is a movie I wasn't really that big a fan of. I mean, it was like, oh, it's an anti-war movie. It's like, no, this is just a goofball comedy, uh, trying to be, basically mocking serious material. Uh, Bridge on the River Kwai is an anti-war movie. This is whatever. This is a '60s movie, and I wasn't a big fan. I saw it at the movies. Um, Strangely, I saw it at a double feature with Burn. So that was the marquee: MASH and Burn. Could have been one movie. Very odd pairing movies. Uh, but Burn is a contemplation of the nature of revolution. It's a Italian made film with Marlon Brando. It's a very odd mix, but there was enough violence and nudity in it that the grindhouse audience I saw it with thought it was great. They liked MASH too for some of the same reasons. But the TV series MASH, I watched it. Everybody watched it. It wore thin with me after Wayne Rogers left. I thought the show took itself way too seriously after Wayne Rogers left, and I didn't like a lot of the characters, and it just kind of, it wore out its welcome for me because it was just snark humor, and just predictable, and also because it was dealing with a serious subject matter, wounded GIs, you know, not the greatest source of comedy in the world. So, Coogan's Bluff to McLeod. And Coogan's Bluff, I remember seeing Coogan's Bluff at the same grindhouse, and it's a fast play Clint Eastwood movie, one of his early Malpazzo productions, and it was obviously made on the cheap and made hurriedly. Despite that, I like it. I like the fact that it's kind of a, understands this is a B movie, and we're not going to, we're going to indulge all the B movie sensibilities. And Eastwood is great in it. There's some great action, great locales. Don Siegel directing, always a good time. Not my favorite Clint Eastwood movie, but certainly solid. But then the concept of it, that a sheriff from Arizona is brought to New York, fish out of water kind of deal, gets adapted into McLeod by Glenn A. Larson, who's famous. It's funny that his name is Larson because he's it should be short for larceny, because Glenn A. Larson would steal ideas from anybody. He was famously once punched out on the set of Rockford Files by James Garner because he wanted him, and he had stolen a bunch of music, and he had stolen an entire storyline from Rockford Files for a show he was producing, even to the point of casting the same actress to play the guest star role. It's exactly the same story. And Larson came around to the Rockford Files set. They asked Garner, like, hey, let's make amends. We're both in the business. And he just wouldn't let up until Garner decked him, knocked him to the floor. Larson famously would steal from anybody. He was the producer of Battlestar Galactica. He stole from the Old Testament, for God's sakes. Battlestar Galactica is the book of Exodus in space. It's crazy. But that's what this guy did. McLeod is a show I watched occasionally, but it was not a good show. It's not a good show. It's a show that never seems to be able to find its way. It never figured out what kind of show it was supposed to be. Was it a hard-hitting crime show? Was it an action show? Was it a comedy? What was it? And it would change week to week. And the most embarrassing was, and when I stopped watching it, was when it began to ape the Columbo format, where they basically have McLeod playing like he's just a po' boy from the sticks. I don't know nothing, and he kind of pretends to be dopey and misguided the way Columbo would, but then come up with all the clues in the end. They just stole the whole format of us seeing the murder and then seeing McLeod solve it by being annoying and pestering the murderer of the week. And that's when I stopped watching it. I said, this is ridiculous. This show doesn't have any of its own ideas, from its basic premise to its execution each week. It's just stealing from everybody. But Larson, made millions in the business. So what are you going to say? Doctari, I never watched Doctari. I remember Clarence the Cross-Eyed Lion. I think I might have seen that at the movies when I was a kid. But it's great in this still, John, to see you in one of your early childhood roles. But yeah, I never watched Doctari. I was obviously aware of it because there are only 3 channels. You knew every TV show, even if you never watched it. Today, you know, I'm sure all of you have had the same experience where you go, "This show's in its 7th season. I never heard of it." Now the Dukes of Hazzard Moonrunners. I've never heard of Moonrunners. I'm gonna have to fix that. I'm definitely gonna have to see this movie. I love movies about moonshining. I love movies with lots of cars crashing and stuff like that. James Mitchum. I mean, come on, Waylon Jennings in it. Um, Arthur Honeycutt. How did Strother Martin stay out of this one? He must have been busy that week. So I did not know Dukes of Hazzard was lifted or taken or inspired by Moonrunners, a movie I never heard of. I always assumed Dukes of Hazzard was inspired by the success of Smoking the Bandit. I mean, Smoking the Bandit was the #2 film in the country the year that Star Wars was released, and Burt Reynolds, this Burt Reynolds vehicle made a fortune at the box office. Like Star Wars, people were going back to see it over and over and over again. Back when people did that, so I always just assumed because Dukes of Hazzard shows up 2 years after Smoking the Bandit left theaters, that it was inspired by that. But I'll tell you something. I have a theory about Dukes of Hazzard, and it's unassailable. You're not even going to be able to argue with it. The Dukes of Hazzard is actually inspired by McHale's Navy. Let's think about it. Let's go through this. Okay. McHale and his crew, his gang of pirates, they operate kind of outside the regulations, outside the law. And Captain Binghamton and Lieutenant Carpenter are always trying to catch them out. Now you recast the McHale's crew as the Duke brothers and Uncle Jesse and Daisy Duke, kind of recast them. They're the crew. They got their little place they hang out in and everything else, like McHale's Island. And then you've got Boss Hogg, Captain Binghamton. The sheriff, I can't remember the sheriff's name, is Lieutenant Carpenter. And if you think about it, the performances of Lieutenant Carpenter and the sheriff, the bumbling guy, kind of the same kind of thing. And to close this out, my closing argument, you're not going to be able to argue with this, is McHale's Navy and Dukes of Hazzard were produced by the same guy, Edward J. Montaigne. So come on. The General Lee, the PT-73, it's the same show. And I watched it. I didn't watch it as a fan. One of my nephews really liked the show. And sometimes, you hang out with the family. And I would watch some episodes with him. And I would watch it. I would go, boy, this plot seems familiar. And then one week, I stayed to the end of an episode. It's like, Edward J. Montaigne. Yeah, that was a McHale's Navy plot. They just readapted it to the South as shot in Southern California. So now Sugarfoot, I watched Sugarfoot all the time when I was a kid. I did not know anything about Boy from Oklahoma. You're teaching me a lot here, Bat Neil. I never heard of a Boy from Oklahoma, which was a vehicle for Will Rogers Jr., who apparently was 41 at the time, kind of old to be playing a boy from Oklahoma, but regardless. But it's the same character name, same motivations and everything else. So Sugarfoot was a direct adaptation of The Boy from Oklahoma. And like I said, I was a big fan when I was a kid of all the Warner Brother Western TV shows, Cheyenne, Bronco, Lawman, Maverick, and Sugarfoot. And I don't think I ever missed an episode of this when I was a kid. I dug it. So I got these postcards, and I want to give them to you. And all you got to do to get them, these are exclusive Chuck Dixon postcards signed, each one autographed by me. You got to go to Subscribestar. Now, apparently, you people are listening because I've got a lot of new subscribers, but I could always use a few more. Go to Subscribestar, Chuck Dixon. I'll put the link in below the video. and you can go there. And for $5 a month, you're going to get these postcards. Also, when you initially join, you get a package. It's a pretty decent package of signed comics, worth far more than your initial, you know, payment to join. In fact, several months of your initial payments to join. So it's a good deal. And then each month, in addition to occasional physical rewards like the postcards, everybody who has a $5 subscription got these postcards. You'll also get other physical rewards, throughout the year. The very first, I think it was My Sister Suprema. The very first My Sister Suprema book went out free to subscribers. So, and each month you get digital goodies. You get unpublished scripts, artwork, things like that sent to your email, and without fail. So, all kinds of like inside baseball, behind the scenes kind of stuff that I have available for you folks. So you might want to head on over there now. Chuck, what do you spend the money on? What do you need this money for? I pay my starving artists. Things like Something Big, My Sister Suprema, the upcoming Seven Deadly Sinners. I got to pay these guys. I'm not getting paid, but I got to pay them. So it creates, I'm gonna say it. It's a slush fund. It's a creative slush fund, so I can create new comic book material without anybody looking over my shoulder, without an editor, without having to pitch. I just write what I want to write, and then my artists draw what they want to draw, and we're all having a good time. And in the end, you enjoy it. And in some cases, if you're a subscriber, you're going to get some of that stuff for free because you help make it happen. So there you go. That is the pitch. Now, why did I do that? So you want to go to Subscribestar. Now, if you want to reach me directly, brunobookstore@gmail.com. brunobookstore@gmail.com is the way to do it. It's the most reliable way to reach me. And I want to thank you all for listening, for watching, for liking, for subscribing, whatever you did, and spreading the word. And I will see all of you down the road.